Hi, my name is Carly Knudson. I just finished up my master's at the University of Utah in Parks, Recreation, and Tourism, and I'm in a first year of a PhD program in that same program. I was lucky enough to be selected by AAPRA for Best Master's Thesis Paper Award, and I'm going to share a little bit about that project with all of you. So this project stemmed from an interest I have in utilizing different community interventions and public nature spaces to support community health and well-being. Specifically within a college campus context, this was interesting to me for the kind of increasing prevalence of mental health concerns in young adults, and also thinking about kind of the limited access to different clinical services and how we can support those clinical services. College campuses are also relevant because compared to kind of some other broad populations or spaces, there's kind of a more readily available access to green spaces, as most campuses have nature built within them. But kind of what I wanted to extend the study from what I've seen been done previously on college campuses is not only to look at the relationship between nature use and different health outcomes, but to also extend and ask the question on if these differences vary based on social identity. So kind of using what's known as this socio-ecological framework, or an acknowledgement that not just on an individual level, but health can also be influenced by different social factors or structural factors, but wanted to kind of move this beyond just the access piece. So college campuses were really well set up for that. So to do this, we designed a cross-sectional survey that was sent out to a randomized range of about 175 different students that gave us information about their use of time in different outdoor and nature spaces across a range. We were inclusive of, whether that time is on college campuses or in kind of deeper, more removed nature spaces, and also looked at anxiety, depression, and self-rated health in those students. We looked at the relationship between those two and found that contrary to kind of what the literature suggests, there wasn't a relationship between time spent in nature and those different mental health outcomes, so anxiety and depression. But there was a relationship between time in nature and subjective or self-rated health. So even though that's kind of an expansive measure of like what well-being and health means, we were still able to kind of break that question apart further to look at different differences between social groups. So specifically, we looked at people's race and ethnicity, their gender identities, sexual orientation, disability status, and their parent income levels, and perform different moderation analysis between each group, and how that time, nature, and health outcomes might vary for each different social group. And in this specific sample, we found that race and ethnicity, as well as disability status, both moderated the impacts between time, nature, and health and subjective health outcomes. More specifically, in our sample, while time in nature was related to positive health in white students, we didn't see the same results in students who identified as being BIPOC. And further, we found that health benefits were more significant for students who identified as having disabilities compared to those who didn't. And so it's a little bit outside the scope of this study to kind of go into the why or the causality or any of that. It's kind of this broad cross-sectional study, but what it does do is add the kind of first initial conversations and questions to kind of challenge some of these assumptions that some of us might hold, that these benefits are neutral and not context dependent, but kind of really pushes us to think more deeply about how these different health benefits might range for different folks and different identities and experiences. We can also encourage other folks to utilize this kind of socio-ecological lens or look more deeply into how these relationships might be different for different folks and different experiences, and especially folks with those identities, helping to push some of this research forward, and also as practitioners to making sure that we're thinking about designing inclusive programs and spaces, reducing different barriers to not only access, but also thinking about factors that might influence how these health benefits might be experienced whether it's through making sure there's a range of different types of nature spaces, or different activities or different affinity groups, potentially even health promoting services that have nothing to do with nature. Maybe it's indoor nature plants or things like that, but kind of just really hoping that this project moves along this idea of kind of making sure that we use these projects in inclusive ways.